All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the reception for the 19th Annual Imprint Competition at the Wharton Esherick Museum. My name is Ethan Snyder, and I'm just going to kick us off as the MC and turn things over to Maria Freeney. Before I do, I just wanted to ask everyone if you're not on mute to please mute yourself. The Zoom is being recorded. We will have a couple presentations and then a chance for some questions at the end. So let me kick it over to Maria to formally introduce today's program.
Thank you, Ethan. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the opening reception for our 2026 Imprint show at the Wharton Esherick Museum. As Ethan said, my name is Maria. I am the K through 12 school program specialist at the museum. I'm very excited to be here with you all today. So this year we had a total of 88 submissions from 35 schools across the Philadelphia area and maybe a little bit beyond. This is our 18th year of Imprint. We are working on new ways to expand the show and grow the program, so definitely stay tuned for that. We have a few new, maybe a handful of new schools joining us this year that haven't submitted work in the past. So we welcome you into the fold, and we hope that you will make this a tradition for you and your students. Welcome back to those schools who have been submitting year after year. Looking ahead to the future of Imprint and programs related to printmaking at the Wharton Esherick Museum, we wanted to alert you to a workshop on Saturday, May 2nd at 1 p.m. in the workshop at the Wharton Esherick Museum, which is a building, if you've been for a tour, it is not usually a part of the tour, so it's getting to kind of see behind the scenes a little bit. We're going to invite a Philadelphia-based artist and illustrator and teach you how to plan and put together tunnel books and construct maquettes. So that should be really fun. Stay tuned for that opportunity. The full Imprint show, still virtual this year, is up on our website, whartonesherickmuseum.org, under programs and exhibitions. So please take a scroll through this year's finalists. A little bit about what we have planned for you today. I want to spend just a minute or two, as is tradition for this program, talking about a few of Wharton's prints and how I saw them connecting to our theme of groundbreaking this year, in some of the same ways that you connected your work to groundbreaking. And then we're going to hear again from our Manager of Collections and Public Programs, Ethan Snyder, and then remarks from our guest juror, Dombrovskaya. And then we're going to talk about our winners, highlight our winners, and just take a moment to honor them. And then we'll wrap up, as we always do, with a little Q&A. We'll open the floor to you. So when I think about this question and how to tie Wharton to the theme of groundbreaking, I think about a personal story, if I may share it for a minute, about how I first connected to Wharton and the museum. When I first came out to the museum, I was honestly feeling kind of lost. I wasn't really happy at work, and I was looking for something more. So I took a tour in this little studio building you see here in this photo. And I heard a story of this guy who also had people around him that wanted him to do something that he didn't really feel was right. His family were wealthy investors. They wanted him to, I think, go into the clergy at one point, which was not for him. So instead, he dared to chase his dream. He dared to follow his passion. He dared to buck expectations, and dedicate his life to his art. And that really had an enormous impact on me. So again, I think it's safe to say that Wharton's whole life was really consumed by his work. His studio itself is one of his works of art, deemed his autobiography because its construction follows his life artistically and personally. He literally breaks new ground by construction. of this studio and construction of this life that's kind of built around this studio. The print you see on the right here is called Diamond Rock Hill. It is his view of the original family home, which sits on Diamond Rock Road. Um, and this view is probably from just up the hill, kind of toward his studio. So again, Wharton was always forging new paths, breaking new ground, personally, professionally, adapting to changing times, exploring new ideas, and then of course there's very much literal groundbreaking as the campus space where the museum sits now evolves over the years. A couple more of Wharton's prints I wanted to share with you. These both come from around 1924. They're illustrations from an edition of Walt Whitman's poem Song of the Broad Axe, a poem itself about pioneering, about the development of what we now know as modern civilization. So literal, historical, for Wharton, professional groundbreaking as he moves from painting into printmaking, as he pivots his career to kind of better adapt to his interests, his needs, and his skills. So on the left, we have building, again, talking about literal groundbreaking, as so many of you did with your work. And on the right, the hammersman, construction. Okay, so now I want to toss things back to our Manager of Collections and Public Programs, Ethan Snyder, for his comments. So take it away, Ethan.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Maria, again for controlling the slides for me today. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for the 2026 Imprint reception here in WEM's virtual space. Again, my name is Ethan Snyder, and I'm our Manager of Collections and Public Programs at the Wharton Esherick Museum. So before I get started, I want to congratulate all the students who submitted work to Imprint this year. All of the work that you submitted was worthy of like the utmost praise. I hope that all of the students who submitted and who are here today feel immensely proud of the artwork that you've created. And I hope that you'll keep in touch with your printmaking practices going forward into the future. As someone who spends a lot of time in and among Wharton Esherick's almost 100-year-old prints, it was such a pleasure and a breath of fresh air to see the complex work that young printmakers are making today in such a variety of different mediums, well beyond what Wharton ever experimented with during his own lifetime. So today I'm going to just briefly talk a little bit about Wharton's time as a printmaker and some of the things that we might take away from it, and especially students as your lives continue onwards. So while Wharton Esherick is best known today or best known for his sculptural furniture today, printmaking was a really essential part of Wharton Esherick's practice for about 15 years. And exhibiting his prints helped him to get established as an artist in other mediums that he is better known for today, like furniture and sculpture. And it's true that Esherick largely left his printmaking practice behind by about 1935, when his large-scale projects in home renovation stole him away from the press. However, Esherick saw himself as a printmaker, and he, writing to his friend and print dealer Carl Ziegesar, who we'll talk about in a little bit, in 1935, while he was breaking ground on one of the biggest projects of his lifetime, wrote to Carl that if he ever got finished with furniture making and decorating interiors, that he fully intended to get back to the press, something that he unfortunately never did. So, Maria, could you hit the next slide, please? Thank you. So Wharton was lucky enough to own his own press, which is something that's pretty rare for people working in printmaking. He purchased a Washington hand press off of the Pottstown Mercury, which was a newspaper in Pottstown, and they were updating their technology. So he got a pretty cheap press in about the early 1920s. And this meant that Wharton didn't necessarily have to rely on the services of a professional printer to strike his blocks on a press. However, Esherick was a willing and brilliant collaborator over the course of his lifetime, working with artisans who brought skills to the table that he didn't have. And while Esherick had left printmaking behind by the time his practice started to develop into more collaborative and communal practices, we do see him experimenting and collaborating with some people in kind of informal ways. But Esherick had left printmaking behind by the time that printmaking in America started to become a very collaborative and communal process after the Second World War. The image that we see here on the right side of the screen is one of those really early printmaking workshops that taught printmakers lithography that was run by George C. Miller. But Wharton was working a little bit before that and in different mediums. So while there were master printers running workshops in Esherick's circle, unfortunately, he was never really a part of those. But I want to highlight that because contemporary printmaking has become a practice that is often so centered around workshops that do foster education, collaboration, and community, as our brilliant juror M will be talking about in a little bit, I do want to highlight a couple instances today where we see Wharton working in community with others around his printmaking practices. And I think that these collaborative ventures early on highlight Esherick's willingness to experiment with new mediums and processes, and his openness to learn from others. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. Thank you, thank you. So the first instance of Esherick's collaboration around the act of printmaking came during the first commission he received as an artist, which was also his first printmaking opportunity ever. So the Esherick family spent the winter of 1919 into 1920 in Fairhope, Alabama, so that Letty Esherick, Wharton's wife, who we see here on the screen, could train as a progressive educator at the local organic school. And if we can go to the next slide. So during this winter, Wharton was approached by a writer from Chicago named Mary Marcy, who wanted to collaborate on a new project of hers, a book of rhymes for children about evolution that was called Rhymes of Early Jungle Folk. And we see both the title page and the cover jacket here on the screen. And this book was published in 1922, which was just a few years before the Scopes Monkey trial, which gives you kind of an idea of kind of Wharton's political inklings and his willingness to take risks. So Fairhope was a winter destination for many creatives like Esherick and like Marcy. So over the course of the next year or so, Mary Marcy and Esherick would collaborate on this project through correspondence as Mary Marcy went back to Chicago and Wharton to Pennsylvania. If we can go to the next slide. So Mary Marcy would send Wharton one verse at a time in the mail, and Esherick would carve her a block in response and send it back, and that would in turn inspire Marcy's next verse. Esherick ultimately carved over 100 blocks for this book for Marcy, and these were some of Esherick's earliest experimentations with relief carving in general. He had begun earlier that winter in 1919 with frame making, and we see one of Wharton's beautiful relief carved frames here in the middle. And at that same time, he starts his earliest experiments with printmaking as well. So prior to purchasing his own press, we have learned that Wharton would strike prints ad hoc in his house with the aid of a metal spoon, which I think is pretty lovely. So we'll go to the next slide. So Esherick carved many of his first ever wood blocks out of really soft woods like basswood. And we're seeing one of those examples here on the screen. And this gave Wharton the freedom to play in a totally new medium for him. He could take his gauge deeply into the block and kind of create blocks that are so deeply carved, they almost look like little relief sculptures. So we have this deeply carved block for Monkey Business and the corresponding print here. And if we go to the next slide, we'll start to see that during the same project, Wharton was experimenting with some other ways to create prints. Here we see some really, really precise line work that's engraved into the block rather than Wharton kind of carving the design out of it like we saw just previously. And this block here, it uses a wood that's much darker and denser than the basswood that we saw before, and it allowed Esherick to get these kinds of details that he wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. So if we go to the next slide, We'll see that Wharton later on even turns his attention towards wood engraving as well, where he takes his tools and instead of digging them into the softer side grain, he starts to dig his tools into the very, very hard and dense end grain of a block to create wood engravings like we see here. And just so people know, because I think this is really lovely, this print April Plowing was one of Wharton's most popular prints that he ever sold during his lifetime. So we can go to the next slide. So we're going to stick in Fairhope, Alabama, to talk about this second instance of Esherick collaborating around printmaking. And I think that this story is really lovely. So Wharton again meets another creative person in Fairhope, Alabama, who is named Carl Zigrisser. So let me just admit this person into the waiting room. So whether an artist makes work with an eye towards having it exhibited one day or dreams of getting their work in front of a curator, Esherick was incredibly fortunate to meet someone in Fairhope, Alabama, who would become a notable print dealer, curator, connoisseur, and tastemaker in the coming decades. And that was Carl Zigrisser, who by 1940 was also the Philadelphia Museum of Art's first curator of prints and drawings. And Carl largely developed the collection of prints that our friend M. Dombrovskaya, who's our juror today, actually stewards for their job. So Wharton met this print dealer Carl during the same stint in Fairhope that he received this first commission with Mary Marcy. And if we go to the next slide. So while Fairhope at heart was an artist community, there may have been a dearth of printmakers in residence there that winter, as Esherick, who was working as the school's art teacher while his wife Letty trained, seemed to be the only person who was ever approached with printmaking opportunities when they reared their heads. So, for example, when the organic school where Letty was teaching and Wharton was teaching art needed a design for their graduating class's diploma, they approached Wharton with the opportunity. Wharton had just been getting his hands dirty with his relief carving tools, carving frames, and some of these first woodblocks. However, the school didn't ask for a relief carving design for their diploma. Instead, they asked Wharton to make them an etching. Something that I know that some of the students here today have done, but something that Wharton had never done before in his lifetime. And this, what we're seeing on the screen here, just so people know, is a lovely lithograph of Carl Zigrisser, so we know what he looks like. And then a letter that that Wharton wrote to Carl, that we'll be talking about momentarily. So if we can go to the next slide. So actually, Maria, if you don't mind going to that slide before, we'll stick on that one for now. Yeah. So, because making this diploma was an opportunity that this young artist, Esherick, did not want to pass up, but relied on a process that he had never done before, he writes to his friend Carl, who had unfortunately just skipped town from Fairhope back to New York. And Wharton writes to Carl in what sounds like an absolute tizzy. Sure, by this point, Wharton may have been able to fake it till he made it with carving tools, but etching, as many people here know, and as many people have experience with, is a totally different type of process that requires different skills, tools, and knowledge. Could Wharton get by with a little help from his friend? We will see. So in this letter that we're seeing here on the screen, Wharton eagerly wrote to Carl, telling him, quote, I happened to mention etching to your wife Florence, and she said that you knew all about it. I wish I had you here to talk about it with me. Esherick then goes on to tell Carl that the head of the organic school, Meredith Johnson, wants him to make this diploma plate for the school. And he admits to Carl, quote, I have never done anything with plates before. Will you advise me on what I need? Or in better words, if you were to get the materials, um, if you knew where to get the materials or where they could be found, will you get them and send them to me with the bill? I think I will need a tool, acid, wax, and a plate 10 by 12. So at first, this correspondence was pretty one-sided. And Maria, I think we can go to the next slide here. And we could see what Wharton wrote to Carl, thanks to Carl having saved that letter. Wharton, on the other hand, didn't seem to save the correspondence he got from Carl. So we're left wondering what Carl did with Wharton's request to get him all of these tools and to teach him how to make an etching. Then one day, as I was reading an essay about Carl Ziegesser's gallery, I actually came across his response that someone else had found and published, which was really, really nice. And instead of Carl responding directly to Wharton about etching, he was pretty astute and went behind Wharton's back completely, in the interest of saving him some trouble. So Carl quickly wrote not to Wharton, but to instead his wife Florence, who is still in Fairhope with Wharton and his family, hoping that Florence could intervene in the situation before Wharton could botch the job and waste all of the supplies that Carl was going to gather for him. And this is what Carl says to his wife. I got a letter from Wharton asking me to get some etching supplies for him. He does not realize how complex a medium etching is and how easy it is to spoil a plate. I don't think anyone could prepare a plate without spoiling at least half a dozen, which I think is great. So, it's unclear exactly how the situation evolved from here. And while our collection at the Wharton Esherick Museum is home to hundreds of woodblock prints and engravings, the single example of an etching print might help determine what might have happened next. And it's what we're seeing here on the screen. So the single etching made by Esherick in our collection has been given the title View from a Window. In comparison to Esherick's woodblocks and engravings, I will admit that I think that this print is much less refined and much less interesting than some of the work Wharton was doing as a relief printer. But it reminds us that even the best and most talented artists make work that is not meant to be exhibited, but is part of a larger process of learning and creating. However, I will say that this type of process gave Wharton the opportunity to experiment with things that he wouldn't be able to in relief printing, like the light and shade that we're seeing here coming through this window. And while we don't know for certain that Wharton ultimately made this diploma plate for the Fairhope Organic School, this etching that we're seeing here is likely the result of his experiments in collaboration with his friend Carl in attempting to make the diploma. So, all in all, stories like this remind us that collaboration can take many different forms, and it can exist outside of formal institutions and organizations that support printmaking. Whether or not you're going off to college or a job or some experience in the summer with the intention of continuing to develop your printmaking practice, Wharton Stories shows us that making art doesn't necessarily have to come out of a workshop or a formal classroom. Instead, in his early years, he never turned down an opportunity and seemingly always found ways to take advantage of them. So I would urge all of these students to find the opportunities that you can to make prints. It could be something as, small as your friends are in a band and they need some, promotional materials for their show. That's your moment to jump in and start to create. Um, Going into college and off into life, the opportunities for printmaking and expression really abound. And I hope all the students who submitted work will really truly keep in touch with the practice that you learned and continued with in your art classes. So I want to end by introducing our juror for this year, M. Dombrovskaya, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for about 7 years now. So M. Dombrovskaya is the Suzanne Andrée Curatorial Fellow of Prints, Drawings, and Photography at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. At the PMA, M has helped to curate a number of print exhibitions, including works by Wanda Gog, printmakers in the Brand X archive, and from the collection of Keith and Jim Straw, which is now currently on view, among many others that I am remiss to not mention. M received their Masters of Arts at the Winterthur program of American Material Culture at the University of Delaware, where they focused on crafts made by incarcerated people at Philadelphia's historic Eastern State Penitentiary. They've worked with museums across the United States. M is really impressive, and I'm really glad to be introducing them to you today, including the Russian Museum of Art in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the archives at the Woody Guthrie Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Fabric Workshop and Museum here in Philadelphia, as well as the Poster House in New York City. And over the years, I've watched M become quite a true print connoisseur, finding prints that they ultimately donate to museums. And we are so absolutely thrilled to have student submissions juried by such a brilliant emerging print scholar and curator. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to M.
Ethan, thank you so much. That was the most generous introduction I've ever received in my life. Um, Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me as a juror. It's been a great experience working with Maria, Ethan, and Katie on this project. Maria, if you could show the next slide, please. As Ethan mentioned, I'm a curatorial fellow at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and I'm incredibly lucky for 40 hours a week to get to nerd out over prints. But the reason I've gotten to where I am is because I had a fantastic high school art teacher, as I know many of those in this Zoom room have as well. And I wanted to start by being a little vulnerable and showing you my first high school print. My high school art teacher showed me a print by Katha Kollwitz, and I said, got it, copied. And because my prints look like this is why I have to be an art historian and not an artist now. But, just to show that we all get better and find the place for ourselves in the world of prints. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the history of printmaking, more specifically in Philadelphia, talk about a few programs that I think might be interesting to emerging printmakers. And also, I want to show you a few prints that I absolutely love and that looking through the fantastic submissions to Imprint this year reminded me of. So starting here with the invention of copper engraving, I think it's a fantastic print. It's a design by Jan Collert, who is a Dutch printmaker in the 17th century. And I think this print really demonstrates how communal printmaking is, that you can't do this alone. And I think from the classroom to the workshop, to various print world experiences. It's really largely about the support and teaching. And when we're talking about the image that's depicted here, printmaking is in itself groundbreaking. With the advancement of paper being more widely available, starting in the 1390s in Europe, there's a fantastic opportunity for scientific knowledge to be dispersed, for people to be able to learn about the history of art, which had previously been available to so few. But printmaking really opened the world. And I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind, that we're standing on the shoulders of many, many print giants. But I think that Philadelphia is maybe more interesting to all of us than uh, a Dutch artist working in Florence in the 17th century. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Philadelphia has always been an incredible city for print education, for arts education in general. I'll definitely, as a 19th century person, mention that Philadelphia had an incredible commercial print history, and Philadelphia was the first place where lithography really gained traction in the United States. But to a narrower history and history of things that still exist in our city, here is an image of Fleischer Art Memorial at the beginning of the 20th century. Fleischer is the first community art school in the US, and it began with Samuel Fleischer in 1898. deciding that in addition to being a very successful businessman, he uh, felt an ethical call as a philanthropist to have a place to teach neighborhood kids classes that the workers and their families in South Philadelphia's working class neighborhoods deserve to also have art education. And Fleischer is still a thriving community art school. And I thought something that might be of particular interest to our crowd today is that they have this fabulous program called the Teen Lounge, which is a drop-in arts education program for teens. It's absolutely free, and you can show up to one session or another. Their website has amazing listings of what the Teen Lounge group is working on. I think this month they're making puppets. So that's fabulous to have the continuity. Next slide, please. One incredibly important place and artist for the trajectory of Philadelphia printmaking was Dox Thrash. And Dox Thrash was born in Georgia and then really made his own way in the world as a Black artist who did not have access to the sort of economic resources that Wharton Esherick would have had in the same period. Dox Thrash performed on the vaudeville circuit, and he first started taking art classes through correspondence courses. So he would draw something and send it to a teacher at a remote art school, and then they would write back to him with their critiques, which is a very old system, but one that's it's hard to imagine even in the early 20th century. But very importantly for us, Dox Thrash participated in the Works Progress Administration's Federal Arts Project in the late 1930s, the FDR period. And Philadelphia was really fortunate to have a fine print division of the Federal Arts Project, which means that so many prints were made in Philadelphia and so many young people were taught how to make prints. And Dox Thrash, in fact, in the Fleischer building, developed a new technology called carborundum mezzotint, where he took the grit from lithography and applied it to copper plates for engraving and got incredible tonal variations. So Philadelphia has been a site of incredible technical experimentation and civic education for prints. Next slide, please. And so to shout out a few more programs, the Print Center, which has been around for over 100 years. They started in the 1960s an amazing program called Prints in Progress. So whereas I was showing 17th century copper plates where you absolutely need a full workshop of people to be able to make and edition those prints. Screen printing, which was largely pioneered by the Federal Arts Project in the 1930s and 40s, became really ubiquitous by the 50s, 60s. Andy Warhol screen printing, your favorite punk bands are screen printing. And the idea that you can have a very portable, simple press means that you can bring the press with you. And so this Print Center program, which was then called Prints in Progress, and now they have an Artists in Schools program, which I think some of the schools that were involved in this competition may have also participated in uh, Artists in Schools program. But they're able to then teach printmaking in a really mobile and portable way. And next slide, please. Um, Marion Bolton Stroud, who was involved with the Print Center in the 60s and saw this program get off the ground, went on to establish the Fabric Workshop and Museum, which Ethan mentioned I was an intern at as a young person. But the Fabric Workshop and Museum ha teaches high school apprentices how to screen print on fabric. And I included this photo of Will Stokes Jr., who passed away just last year, because he was in the first class of high school apprentices at Fabric Workshop and Museum and had a studio space in the museum until up until his death. So high school printmaking is so formative. Next slide, please. And they still have a high school apprentice program. This is last year's group. And Anthony, who's wearing the baseball cap in the back, is the mentor and teacher for the high school apprentices. I know we had some fantastic submissions that were prints on textiles. So if you're interested in textile art and if you're interested in screen printing, this is an amazing opportunity that high schoolers can apply to. Next slide, please. And another part of Philadelphia print education for over 60 years now has been the print study room at the PMA where I work. So plug of my own. But it's really amazing how much historical resonance prints have. And when I was looking at the prints submitted for this competition, I was thinking about prints in the collection that they remind me of. And uh, it's just, I feel that printmakers and historians are hand in hand as understanding technique, and seeing a print in person. There's really no substitution for it. It's amazing that we have digital technology and we can look at everyone's prints online today, but uh, I highly recommend that you come to the print study room. It's free. You just have to email us and say what you're interested in seeing. So I will drop the email for that in the chat. But based on my work in the print study room, where I've seen many, mostly college printmaking classes come and discuss technique and history and get great ideas for future projects, I wanted to devote some of my remarks to showing you great prints in the collection that reminded me of things I had seen in Imprint this year. Next slide, please. There were some fantastic prints that referred to the tools of printmaking itself in a just sort of clever, self-referential way. And this is a lino cut by Wanda Gog, who was also a good friend of Carl Zagrosser and was in some of the same exhibitions as Wharton Esherick. This is a platen press, which is used for letterpress printing, and she did a whole series of these hand press tools. Next slide, please. I really got the sense that many of the very clever, fantastic students in this competition got a real understanding of Wharton's aesthetic and his interests, and we had some really great relief prints that were reminiscent of Wharton's. Next slide. I was really impressed by the use of color this year and by incredible registration, whether we were looking at repeat patterns or just reduction cuts. I was thinking about ukiyo-e Japanese woodcuts because I'm always amazed by the precision of these and the small variations that, until you realize these are made by woodblock, seem very um, beautiful but normal, but understanding the technique really gives a whole new appreciation and understanding of the work. Next slide. There were a lot of prints with a great sense of humor and personal perspective. And Barbara Westman is an artist who has done a lot of New Yorker cartoons and has a really unique illustration style. She did this whole series called What Do You Do? And it ranges from very snooty high professionals to the bunny rabbit who says chomp, chomp, chomp. Next slide, please. There was a really amazing graphic sensibility and the understanding of positive and negative space in both relief and intaglio prints that were submitted reminded me of Otto Dix's 1920s output. There were also a lot of prints about the city and what it means to be part of civilization. So I thought this really loud, tumbling, walking street noise night scene was reminiscent of that. Next slide, please. There was a lot of representational and political work and students really thinking through issues that are important to them. And I love this Kara Walker print, Dread, which is a pun referring to a dreadlock, but also a sense of dread in the form of the whip that the dreadlock becomes. And that's an amazing thing about the medium of etching is you can do so much with form and darkness and light variations. So it's, yeah, an incredibly skilled and clever work. Next slide, please. And there was a lot of thinking about our joint humanity and what this broken world needs to have fixed about it. And I thought of this 1899 print by Kata Kollwitz, in which she's actually depicting a huge uprising in the 1520s as part of the Protestant Reformation, where peasants were fighting for greater social and economic power. So there are some topics that feel absolutely eternal. Uh, and those are the prints that I thought were interesting to think about together with some of the fantastic prints that were submitted by students. And students, your work is important and is part of a greater history of printmaking that I think is really admirable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Em. Well said. We were so thankful to have you with us this year and hope that we can continue to collaborate in the future. So before I get into this year's top prize winners, I want to say I'm sorry in advance if I mispronounce anyone's name. You can feel free to jump in and correct me. So once again, this year we have two winners for honorable mention. We have a tie. First, we have Erica Case from Springfield Township High School with her work, A Single Life, A World of Difference. And then we have Sylvia Hu from Delaware County Christian School with her work, Repeating Animals. Erica or Sylvia, are you here? Would you like to say a few words about your work? No pressure. Okay, well, definitely feel free to check out the full site on our website, or the full show, excuse me, on our website again, and appreciate all these great works. Our third place winner is Miranda Jajitz. Again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, from William Penn Charter School for her work, Duncan Lane. I understand Miranda was not able to make it today, so I hope that she is celebrating wherever she is because she did an amazing job. In her statement, Miranda talks about the significance of this house in her family and how this house and its role in her family changes over time. Second place and viewer's choice this year goes to Ichthyosaur by Alana Lazul of Pope John Paul II High School. Alana, are you here? Would you like to say a few words about your work?
Um, I don't really, I'm not really sure. Well, this was my first time ever doing etching, and it was a really interesting process to start, like, to learn how to do. It wasn't really like anything I've ever done before. Um, that's really all I have to say.
And you won second place and viewer's choice. So very impressive. Thank you for that. Um, as many of you might know, every year we post every submission we get for Imprint on our Facebook page, and we have our community vote. So that's an opportunity to sometimes vote another print into the show. But this year, the jurors and our community were in alignment, and they both chose this beautiful piece. Our grand prize winner is Kadar Moore from Springfield Township High School, and his work took 21 years. Kadar, are you here, and would you like to say anything about your work?
Yeah, I'm here. Um, well, thank y'all. And I wrote about, well, like each one of the dolls that I did was like a stamp. So I did the full print and I stamped each and every one of the dolls. So that took a while. And I did 21 years because it took 21 years for the first black Barbie doll to come out compared to the original Barbie doll. So I thought the new doll display was like a pretty groundbreaking moment in American history. So that's why I did it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for your beautiful work. Thank you all for participating. Um, to wrap things up, I would like to open the floor to anyone here who might have a comment, a question, anything they would like to share.
Hi, Maria. My name is
Hi,
Julie. I'm the director of the Wharton Esherick Museum, and I just want to interject and say, as usual, I've been at the museum for 10 and a half years, and every year I'm just gobsmacked by the quality of art that is submitted. And I just want to encourage all of you to stay on with that practice. I know once you leave formal education, eventually those opportunities become fewer and further between. But our work at the museum, I'm sure Em agrees, I think meeting and satisfying your creative curiosity with any kind of work that you might do in the future is just, I really hope to see all of you continue to do this because I see an incredible amount of talent. And when we go through these works together and I hear you talk about them, I think this is also how we are able to connect divides that Em was referencing earlier. So, art is a powerful thing, and I'm really, really amazed at the quality of work. So I encourage all of you to keep going. And I thank you for being brave to submit your work. Well done.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, well, again, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you for your participation in Imprint. Thank you to the teachers who made this possible for us and have proven to be wonderful collaborators for myself. Again, please don't miss our Book Arts in the Workshop, the Art of Tunnel Books event on May 2nd. And check out the events page of our website for more. And we hope that you can come out to the museum and join us for a tour. Until then, thank you again. Congratulations and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.